Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a video on cutting people off, why, like, the effects of toxic people and why you shouldn't feel obligated, and how you can actually ditch these people, because no one is here to be abused. We're on this planet once. Ain't nobody got time for, you know, shitty people, so this is it. And also I just feel like it's like, I heard someone talk about how you can have like a demonic person like assigned to ruining your life, and how you should really take toxic people and detrimental people very seriously and sort of do all you can to ward them off in whatever way. Like, I'm literally not against okay, I'm not saying like people should be violent and like you've got to be aware of the law, but I feel like being, you know, assertive as possible with these people and doing whatever you can to assure them that often most of the things to do with toxic people, the reaction you have is within your own head and in your own mind, often, and once you sort of come to that realization that you don't deserve it and they're sort of, you know, they say once someone, you know, you can't actually apparently damage another person when you are in source energy, because like that's not the way the universe works or something, and it says in the Bible like whoever tries to harm another person will get harmed themselves or something. So take that with a pinch of salt. I heard the you can't hurt another person in source energy from Abraham Hicks, so I don't actually know if that's true though, because how would anyone get hurt? Moving on. Yeah, so cutting people off, it's just one of those things that has to happen sometimes, and I think it comes from a place of trauma, stress, you know, past wounds, inner child wounding that has brought you to a place of, I did this meditation today for inner child healing and sort of finding the divine energy within your inner child, and sort of releasing the negative emotions associated with that, and it was really helpful because it had this thing like, what beliefs would you let go of if you were to release your inner child from all obligation, all harm that was done to you as a child, like it wasn't your fault type of thing. What beliefs would you incorporate from learning that? I just feel like a new reformed person ever since that, to be honest, even more so like than I was before. And yeah, so effects of toxicity, like, it ranges massively, obviously, but I also think it comes down to the basic fact of, if someone's like, toxic things make us sick, like that is the long and short of it. I myself, I'm not saying like when I do this I always like to bear in mind my own traits. I believe I have borderline traits. I'm not borderline personality disorder, but I feel like I show certain symptoms of that which could be considered a toxic personality trait. I'm also very empathic though, and overall I would say that I'm not a toxic person, but I know a lot of people that are, and I'm differentiating a lot the difference, but because I've been through the mental health system, I engage with a lot of people, and going through life, I'm realizing the difference. Because if you've got a good heart, and it's not just because I went through the mental health system, if you have an empathic mind and an empathic outlook, you're going to adopt this mentality that like everyone deserves, like you're gonna assume everyone else is the same, basically. Apparently you can have two mindsets. You can either assume everyone's like you, or you can have a secular focus and focus on one thing outside of yourself and try and that's how you understand it. Sorry, I'm not being very like scientific. It sounds very like my science doesn't sound very on point here, but anyway, it is true. So just let's get into I like talking from the heart from this sort of stuff, because I feel like that's when my best content comes out, and stuff that kind of hits. So yeah, I feel like the effects of toxicity can vary, but I think it comes down to toxic things make you sick, and regardless of what is going on in terms of the situation or the person, I want to give a bit of like bolstering to any empaths out there. I've got a narcissism video coming out, or multiple, there's one that's an hour long, which I've sectioned out. I don't think it's gonna have to go up on its own, or whether I'll just finish it off, I don't know, and then put it up. But that's to come. But empaths, when they go into empathic supernova, or what some people would assume is reactive abuse, if you like, or whether you can have reactive abuse or you can have empathic supernova. Empathic supernova is basically where you get so picked at all the time to your internal self that you eventually explode and get really angry. I was watching a video on empathic supernova, and it can destroy a narcissist. Like, it can basically, you can learn all their techniques, reflect it back to them, torment them for who they are as a person, because I don't think you should give these people a leg to stand on. If you ask me, if they're going to be abusive, they're going to be abusive. Like, you can't excuse that for anything, and it's not going to happen. So you can kind of nitpick them back for doing all the things they do, and sort of like give them a taste of their own medicine, and then eventually they should kind of get that they're sort of like figured out, and then you can kind of move on with your life, and they'll sort of like move on too, because their tactics don't work. And if you're educated, this can happen a lot sooner. But obviously everyone's different. But yeah, the effects of toxicity, I suppose from a physical standpoint, maybe like lethargy, sort of oh, there's like a book underneath my foot, it's driving me nuts. Like lethargy, I think obviously different things can impact physical symptoms, but maybe like a low self-esteem, like obviously that can have a lot of impacts as well. Generally, like, though, if you're consistently being affected by a person sort of targeting you in whatever way, or sort of like just doing things in your life that might be offensive, or you've got someone like bombarding you with messages, or you've got people that are trying to guilt trip you into things. Like, I've got a situation coming up that I literally am gonna like dick out on, I'm gonna like ditch, because I'm not being funny, like, I don't like the word ditch because it sounds a bit like school childy, but I'm getting better and better at like just discarding from the situation. Like, at the end of the day, it's not my responsibility. Someone that puts that responsibility on me is a codependent, like, and not a positive codependent, like a narcissistic codependent, like leeching off me for like supply, like a leech. And it's not my responsibility to be responsible for that. Like, I'm responsible for myself, I'm not responsible for leeches. So I'm gonna like ditch that situation. I think, like, you know, you can like literally just send someone a text and be like, no, like, I don't want to see you. Like, it's not like, and it's not an insult. I mean, it's just what it is. Like, you're not responsible for someone else's like mistreatment of you, and if they're like expecting to have another way in, like, it's just not going to happen. Like, you can't allow that to happen. Like, it's about you setting these boundaries and just not engaging. I think once you get to that point in your mind as well, that one thing I've noticed as well is when you separate, when you're involved in childhood abuse, or you've had some sort of abusive partner or abusive upbringing in some way, you can often, and it's so common, it's the thing that people do when they're abused, as a way of, it's an adaptive mechanism in your mind to blame yourself. And as an adult, you can bring that forward. So therefore, if it happens as an adult, you take responsibility for it yourself, and it shouldn't happen. Just as people have issues and mental health problems and ongoing trauma to deal with, which I definitely am still working through myself, and I think a lot of people are, and a lot of people are on their own journey anyway and have their own lives to expand in the entirety that they are as a person, and that's their responsibility and their will from God to have and right. But when you are abused, obviously you have this internal mechanism to defend the abuser in like a Stockholm syndrome kind of manner, and you kind of start to love your abuser, but it's your mind's mechanism as to not drive you mad and make you so emotionally fearful of the situation that you know, like self-destruct. But yeah, so I think as I'm processing that more and more, I'm seeing that the more work I do on myself, the more toxic I see that certain people are, and how it's not my, obviously it's not my responsibility, but it's not my fault that they are how they are. I can't change them. I can't change, I can do certain things to alter the circumstance to hopefully ward them off, or tell them I'm not going to deal with it, mentally bolster myself in order to not be affected by behaviour. you know, distance myself. And I think that's a pathological thing that people that have been abused have to strengthen in their mind, and that's why I say it's very mental, a lot of this stuff, because people that have had this, especially in childhood, and have had abuse or traumas and sexual traumas and stuff like that, there's a real breakdown of neural pathways in assertiveness and things like that often, for various reasons. And I know everyone sees the world through a lens of their own trauma, but I discuss a lot in my narcissist video that narcissists, some people help people and some people hurt people. So hurt people can either help people or they can hurt people. Narcissists hurt people because they've been hurt, but empaths and people that aren't strongly narcissistic, even though everyone has slight narcissistic traits, some people that are extremely narcissistic will hurt people because they are hurt, and it's not for others to pick up the slack, or be abused, because at the end of the day, when hurt people, all they want to do is abuse. They can't get healed to the point, it's not possible for narcissists to heal to the point where they're able to help people and they're unable and they don't abuse. They always abuse. Like, that's the curse that they are under as narcissists, and it's not changeable, unfortunately. It's consistent. Narcissists can change their behavior and alter it and keep it to the point where it's sort of, you know, tolerable for some people, but it's very controlled. But you eventually, but it's still, the cycle's still there. And it's very dangerous and detrimental. So it's, I think if you are narcissistic, like I have narcissistic traits that I think I'm a dark empath, which makes me have high, I talk about all this in my narcissism video, but I have high enough traits of narcissism, but I like try and recognise them myself. Because I'm empathic, I will often save those narcissistic traits to be taken out on people I feel like deserve it or are abusing as a person anyway. Like, that's the way I go about it. But people that don't have a sense of empathy at all will obviously not be able to detect that that hurts another person, or if they do, they aren't wired to care about it, so they will just continue to abuse because that's the way they cope. And it's just the sad reality of it, but it's the truth. And it's just a massive spectrum, but I'll talk about that in my narcissist video. But yeah, you shouldn't feel obligated. I've basically said everything I need to say, but if you're in a similar situation, like, you have the right to choose who are in your life. Like, and trauma is such an important thing to bear in mind, with all these things, to have compassion with yourself. And I even did it in my meditation, to have compassion with your inner child and everything. I would definitely recommend meditation if you're in a similar boat to me. But I think the whole world has changed in a massive way. Apparently in Aquarius, we're a lot more inclined to not worry about things like family as a guideline for relationships. It can be, we have the right to choose who we want. It's less like social constructs which keep us in a mold. What I mean, it's less about social constructs and more about where you resonate as a person. And we all resonate at different places, and I'm not saying if you resonate with a friend differently, and we all resonate, we even watched Abraham Hicks today, you can't resonate with the same with anyone completely, and we have to learn to coexist with other people at the right distance to be able to handle the world and live in harmony to an extent. But that doesn't mean like people want to live in harmony. A lot of people don't want to live in harmony. But anyway, yeah, that, I can't remember what I was saying now. I think that's more or less what I was trying to say. Just, you can get away from these people. You have, and I'm getting more and more into universal laws, how we have the right to choose who we interact with, who we, you know, spend time with. You know, there's the very small minority of people that will, you know, stalk you or whatever. Hopefully that's not the case for anyone. It does happen. That's why things like restraining orders and stuff are put in place, to avoid that, because it is a criminal action. But, you know, most people will eventually like get the hint, and, you know, it's a case of, it's really hard when it's things like family members though, because there could have been a lot of abuse that's gone on there, and it could have broken, as I say, a lot of neural pathways that you can have a lot of resentment, and unfortunately the Stockholm syndrome repeats, and it's very sad, it's very dangerous. And I would recommend getting some help and therapy and having a supportive network that can support you in this time, because it's really difficult. Without the mental health system, I don't know where I'd be at this point, to be honest. and this sounds like a very, very desperate sounding video, but at the same time it's also very securing for me to feel, actually, because I know that I've had the worst of it. And I'll talk again, this is more about narcissism now, so I'm not even going to go into that, but I think it's important to realise that once you get distance from these people that are abusive by nature, and it's about assessing whether they're abusive by nature, and being honest with yourself. And I know a lot of people will be like, yeah, duh, but at the same time it happens to, you'd be surprised like how many people it happens to, and I'm sure it happens across the whole spectrum of the planet. It's just about how lucky you are in upbringing to have those strong resources to protect yourself, and I suppose everyone has to assess that. No one's indestructible at the end of the day. I know we all have our own issues, and I know I tend to seem to bash narcissists on all these videos, and narcissists are abusers, but at the same time there's a whole spectrum of people. I'm sure things that I've said with my anyway, I'm not going to blame myself here. I'm kind of against the boundaries. It's about keeping yourself in line as well. I know I'm not perfect, and I know I'm far from perfect, and I'm no better than anyone else with narcissistic traits or not, and I'm aware of that. At the same time, you have to prioritise yourself, what you know you're about as a person, making sure you're not perpetuating as much as you can abuse that you might have encountered in the past, and distancing yourself from people that are having a negative effect and keeping an eye closely on that. Because we are, at the end of the day, universally, and I think God has us all in his hands. I'm a massive stander by Footprints in the Sand prayer, where it talks about God carrying us through our most vulnerable times where we can't even walk ourselves. God carries us, and I've experienced that firsthand loads to know that it's definitely true. But I feel like if that's the case, you have to allow that to happen, but at the same time obviously take like worldly action that needs to be taken as well. But you know, the more you distance yourself from these people, the more aware you can see what they're like and build stronger connections in your mind to go about living a more satisfying, fuller life for yourself without these people trying to drag you down to their level or space, and abuse, basically, because a lot of people are out to abuse, unfortunately. It's the sad truth. And eventually, hopefully, coming to peace with it. Some people say they find full forgiveness, some people don't. I know God looks at their heart, changes people's heart. I feel like I've come to peace with so much stuff recently that I never thought I would, to be honest. Just stuff that's happened recently that I felt a massive amount of bitterness towards. God's just lifted that from my soul, and I know that he does it to everyone else, and I know that sometimes you get so, when people are scared to come to realizations of things because they don't want to feel these negative things like bitterness and stuckness and anger and frustration and everything like that. I prayed about it and God lifted that stuff from me, and I'm even able to tolerate people in my life even now that I have to tolerate, well, yeah, like just like from a really tiny standpoint, but I still have to tolerate them. Obviously I don't have to respect them. I heard this quote today: don't respect anyone that doesn't respect you, apparently. And I did a whole video on respect, which isn't that good actually. I wouldn't even, but it's okay, but you can watch it if you want. It's with my old phone. I wasn't very good at it that day. But yeah, just I'm trying not to ramble, but I just want to get it out. Yeah, just feeling like you have the ability to achieve what you want, and no one can come in, swoop in and take any portion of your self for themselves. It's not their right as a person to do that. I talk so much on my narcissism video, which will give you some clarity that I have about certain abusive people in the world, which might help some people. But anyway, I think that's more or less everything. But, you know, I also think God brings us the things we're supposed to at the right time. I don't think God ever wants us to be abused, and that was a massive thing that I thought, like, you know, we are made in the image of God. God does not want us to be abused. We do live in the world. We do sin, you know. But anyway, let's not get all religious. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the best of luck with dealing with negative, toxic people in your life. Hopefully you don't have to encounter them. If you do, please either set healthy boundaries, be honest and truthful with yourself, because if you don't, you're in cognitive dissonance, and says in a lot of songs, God does not forgive cognitive dissonance. It's a song. I wasn't like, but you know, if you're honest with yourself and you face the reality of it at your own pace, at your own time, I know it takes time, especially with abuse. Can't always be something that people are able to face or even want to deal with because they've got certain obligations, children, blah, blah, blah. But if you are in that space, please, in time, seek some help if needed to come to the necessary arrangements to get away, to ditch, to leave, to break the relationship, to break the trauma bonds and the bonds with these people that are literally out for your worst, basically, and not trying to support you or be respectful of you in your life, but to drag you to a dysfunctional place that they are stuck in